I'm Brett Farrell, and in this series I've been talking to fathers to see how they navigate this thing called fatherhood.
And yet one of my kids wants nothing to do with God. Wants nothing to do with God.
In this episode, I speak to Pastor Jack Haynes, an American expat and military man who's married to Carol. Over 30 years ago, they left America to start a church in the western suburbs of Sydney, Australia. Together, they pastor Imaginations Church. Is there anything you've observed with your own family or having seen, pastored many families over your lifetime that you see and think, that kind of parenting will work and this kind of parenting won't? Any observations?
This is a really deep question, I think, because you can have good, godly parents who've raised kids right, and yet still those kids have been a huge disappointment to those parents.
Jack and Carol have 3 children, 1 son and 2 daughters, and 4 grandchildren, all from Joelle, their youngest daughter. And they haven't given up hope on a few more.
I've often said grandkids are the reward for getting older, because just about every part of getting older sucks.
Brilliant. Jack reflects on life's choices, children, and change.
If you were to ask me the question, do you have any regrets as a father? I would say yes.
Is there anything you've observed with your own family or having seen, pastored many families over your lifetime that you see and think, that kind of parenting will work and this kind of parenting won't? Any observations?
I guess you have 2 choices. You can grow older and grow bitter. I've seen some real cranky old codgers, really unpleasant. Or you can grow older like a fine wine.
I'm Brett Farrell, and this is Fatherhood. Pastor Jack, thanks for joining us today and talking about not only fatherhood, but grandfatherhood.
Well, it's a pleasure, Brett. Thank you for asking me.
No, I couldn't have picked anyone better for the topics we need to cover today. What is it about being a grandparent that you do things with your grandkids that just drive your kids nuts? Why do grandparents do that?
Maybe it's payback is a bear. I don't know. Now, see, I'm really stumped here that you're starting off with what I know the least about, and that's about being a grandparent. I've often said grandkids are the reward for getting older, because just about every part of getting older sucks. But grandkids, they make the sore knees, the bad back, the blurred vision. They make it just all worthwhile. I don't know what it is, but there's something about seeing your life, your children's life, in the life of those kids, those grandkids, and it's pretty special. But yeah, it is kind of good, to oh no, don't do that. They've never done that before. Excuse me, they have actually done that before, because I took them and we did that.
But how does it work? What's the emotion like when you find out you're going to be a grandparent for the first time? Is there any parallel to finding out you're going to be a father?
That's a great question. Being a father was like traumatic almost, wonderful. Finding out I was going to be a grandparent was ecstatic. It was almost like all the joy of being a parent without all of the gulp involved in it.
Yeah, all joy, no accountability. As a dad, where your kids are now, is that what you hoped for them would be? I mean, let's be honest, we've all got hopes for our kids, and we all hope they might do certain things a certain way. What's that look like? Does it work out how you hope?
I think for us, I try to look at it not just in the moment, but over the the bigger picture. And there've been some amazing ups and downs and their own life situations, but we love them. We're close, and in some ways, it's almost like I've got this little thing in the back of my mind that says, there's more of this wonderful adventure to come.
Fatherhood doesn't stop once they turn 18 or 21. I haven't even begun to think about them growing up and one day having children. Most of us are likely to be in Jack's position with grown-up kids, and one day when that comes, have we done enough to prepare them? I've got younger kids, so I'm still trying to figure this out. When, with your older kids, do you kind of step back a little bit? I mean, you do the work, you mold, you shape, you guide, you pray, you hope, you yell, you scream, all of the above. At what point do you step back and say, okay, over to you?
That's a great question, and it's more than at what point, it's at what points, because I think that's something you have to do a lot. You have to step back a lot and say, okay, over to you, over to you. Yeah, there's probably a time when you're thinking, now mate, you're an adult, and I love you, I trust you, I'm cheering for you, I'm in your corner. But I find now through the years, there's many times, I don't know, I keep taking things back, and I have to keep releasing things.
Okay. Even now when they're, I guess, adults, they're not, I mean, they'll always be your kids, but
It's
they're
funny
grown-up
because,
now.
my all of my kids now are in their 30s. They are adults, and yet it's just so easy for me to see little faces when I look into their face.
Wow. As a dad myself, I'm worried that I'll try my best to guide my kids in good things, encourage them in good ways, but they'll make their own decisions which might frustrate me a little bit. How do we cope with that as dads, though, when you see there could have been a better decision?
Well, I guess in some ways our kids are no different than us when we were kids, are they? I mean, and they are going to make decisions. I think the best you can do as a dad for your kids is to love them, believe in them, believe that when it's all said and done, that even if they've made a bad turn or done something that grieves you or disappoints you, that God has a big view. And sometimes even the bad things can end up turning into things that lead to real growth in their life.
I find that letting go is easier as they get older, giving them space to make their own choices and watching them learn and grow. At least these days, they can express what they think, even if in shrugs and grunts. Have you had that moment where you've sat back, perhaps you've been nervous, anxious for one of the kids, and you see, I guess, the growth moment come out of something which you were a bit worried about?
Yeah. One of my daughters, when she was in high school, she was going through a real difficult time. Her and I clashed one evening over the meal, and she just really ticked me off. I got so mad. And by the way, let me just say, if you were to ask me the question, do you have any regrets as a father? I would say yes. And my main regret would be the times I became angry. I regret those times. I regret ever becoming angry. Terrible thing, really, because I'm so mad at her now. I don't even remember, I don't think what we were fighting about, just how her attitude just really made me angry. I hate to say this, but I actually swore at her. And I don't do that. I don't swear at all. But I think I said, damn, or something to her in anger. And she just looked at me and her eyes got really, really big, like my dad, my pastor. I went into the living room and I sat there just so angry, and then all of a sudden I was so ashamed. And I thought, why did I let this go so, how did I let myself get like this? And I felt like there was a rip between me and her that may be irreparable. It just seemed like one of those moments. And as I just sat there and prayed and shook like a leaf, I was so angry. And now I was so embarrassed. And by God's grace, within 20 minutes, I think, I knocked on her door. And she opened her door, and I asked her to forgive me. I asked her to forgive me for being so angry. I asked her to forgive me for letting this go and swearing and doing, And, in that moment, she forgave me. She cried. I hugged her. She hugged me. I often wonder what would have happened if I had just let that go. If I'd have just let her go into a room and stew, and I would have gone my way and stewed. I just wonder how deep, because, she was probably 16.
How many times have we let things stew for way too long? What does it matter? Who was right? Who was wrong? It's not that I won't get frustrated, impatient, or angry. It's that I'm the adult, and I need to master my emotions and pick my battles. Do you know this topic, fatherly anger? It's come up in every father I've spoken to as a regret, as a wish I'd handled it differently, as perhaps shrugged off as a fact of life bound to happen. Of course it is, we're all human. But I'm just moved to now ask, how can we get better so that we don't? Because I know I'll be sitting at that table and have sat at that table. And there's that age coming where you can feel it ready now. And I reckon if I don't have some strategies, and I think other guys don't have strategies, how are we going to cope with this? Or we're just going to have to live with the regret? Because that's the outcome, right?
Right. You may have answered the question yourself right there, Brad, because it's the outcome. It's not the moment. What's the outcome going to be? And the outcome may be that my daughter and I, or my son and I, or whoever, is involved, we may get further and further apart over an issue because I'm not going to give an inch. Well, guess what? When you're 15 or 16, you're not going to give an inch either. But for you and me, it's more surface, I think, and it's because it's a temporal anger. But for a kid, a teenager, that's going to go way deeper. It's going to last a lot longer. It's going to stay where you and I might be able to get over it and probably in a few days not even hardly remember it. It's interesting that your kids can tell you stories as adults that are very significant to them that you don't even remember.
Really?
I've had this happen to me over and over again. I've had my kids talk about something, and to them it's quite obviously. Now they're adults and they're bringing it up, and I swear I can't even remember the situation or the encounter. So, that being said, some things are going to go much deeper in them. And I think when you find yourself in that anger moment, the very thing you said, as this could end in regret, obviously. Okay, so if that's the case, I need to think that they're not going to think that. They're not thinking 5 or 10 years from now. They're just a teenager. But you have the capacity to see further and to think further. And so because of that, and because of the fact that this is going to go much, much deeper in her or in him, that's where really I think the most responsibility's got to be on us. And we've got to help them to not, yes, look, there's legitimate things that we need to correct. There's legitimate things that we need to make right. And I don't regret anything that I've tried to make right. It's just I do regret sometimes trying to make it right just out of a absolute spit the dummy, yell and scream, anger. I mean, what are you thinking? What is that going to accomplish? What would that do in a marriage? What does that do in any relationship? What makes a father better, I think, is a deep, deep sense of humility and selflessness. Anger, every time I got angry at my kids, in some ways, it was just so selfish. Because instead of taking the time to walk this through, no, I'm frustrated now, I'm angry now, I'm trying to deal with this and fix this, as it were, in a moment. You're not fixing it, but trying to do all that in a moment. It takes more thought than that. It takes more depth than that. And it takes humility, really, I think, to raise kids and let them feel loved. When you don't want to love them, you want to choke them.
Yeah.
Not physically, but
some days it's physical.
I'll leave that to you. I was going to say, I'd hate to say that out loud.
Jack and I may joke about it, but tempers can get out of hand. Actions boil over. And sometimes things happen that we wished hadn't. When you apologised in the story you were just recounting about that time with your daughter over the dinner table, was it difficult to go and apologise?
Let me just say, Brett, that I didn't apologize. I asked her to forgive me. There is just such a difference, because I think to apologize is to say I'm sorry. And I think she could look at me and say, you got it. You are one sorry dude. See, I don't think apologizing is really, I don't think there's much to it. I'm sorry. What does that mean? I'm sorry I got caught. I'm sorry you saw me. I'm sorry that you're not happy. I'm sorry. And I've just, years ago, I learned in my marriage, actually, that I'm sorry just puts a Band-Aid over something. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't heal anything. It doesn't release anything. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even require a response. She didn't even have to say anything. I'm sorry. I didn't ask it. It's just a statement. But I went to her and I said, I'm so wrong on how I just reacted and responded to you. So proud, so wrong to be so angry. And I ask, would you forgive me? Now that's different.
But it's still hard to
Hard,
say, right?
It's like dying on a cross, hard. But here's the beauty of it. The more you do it, the less you want to do it. Therefore, you change your behavior, because it'll bring you right back here, if you don't change your behavior, to this place where you've got to ask for forgiveness again, and it'll gut you to ask for forgiveness. It just takes, it'll humiliate you to pieces. All right? Well, then don't do it again.
If the man of God gets angry, what hope do I have? Or any of us? Humility is the key, and that's hard. And that's what a lot of us, me included, need to practice. But admitting your wrongs and asking for forgiveness, well, that's a game changer. Is there anything you've observed with your own family, or having seen, pastored many, many, many families over your lifetime, that you see and think, that kind of parenting will work and this kind of parenting won't? Any observations?
This is a really deep question, I think, because you can have good, godly parents who've raised kids right, and yet still those kids have been a huge disappointment to those parents. Here's kind of how I think about that. I was raised in a non-Christian, alcoholic, multi-marriage environment. I'm the oldest of 6 children. My mother was 15 years old when I was born.
Wow.
And she had 6 kids by the time she was like 23 or 24. Hard life, tough life, and later in life, full alcoholic, married 7 times, domestic violence, abuse. Probably, Brett, if you could name it, it's happened in my family. And yet, in the midst of that, as a 10-year-old boy, I found Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. My parents never took me to church. My parents never encouraged any kind of Christian, no prayer, no Bible, nothing. I was raised in a blue-collar, hardworking stepdad scenario. But I found Christ because some neighbors took me to Sunday school once. And there I met Jesus. And so I realized that in that setting, you would think no one would turn out, in a fairly stable condition. And yet I did. So now I reversed that situation. So now Carol and I, we're raising our own children. And they see us, Carol and I don't think they ever saw us fight, domestic, anything like that. I'm sure, they saw us unhappy and things, but they never really saw us have a fight. We prayed together, we took to church, and yet one of my kids wants nothing to do with God. Wants nothing to do with God. And so here's kind of what I think. I think when it's all said and done, no matter what the environment, no matter what the situation, kids are going to make up their own mind. They're going to make up their own mind. And they're either going to do right because they want to, or they're not going to do right because they want to. And I think some parents carry the guilt. Maybe we should have done this more or done that more. And yet I go back and think, wait a minute. When I was 6, 7 years old, I was learning to call the cops to come and stop the domestic violence that was happening in our home. Life and death scenarios and situations. And yet I found Jesus, I found life, I found stability in the midst of instability. And here you can have someone raised in a very solid, loving, never seen anything like that, never even experienced anything like that in their life, and yet they want to walk away and do their own thing. So I think we do all we can. We love our children, we serve them, we bless them, we pray for them, we let them know we accept them. We do everything we can to encourage them. But when it's all said and done, brother, we are going to find that people are going to make up their own minds.
Did your oldest child tell you that, listen, Dad, thanks for all the Christianity, but I'm out? Or was it more over time you noticed withdrawing?
It was both. The withdrawing first.
Yeah. What's that feel like as a father, not as a pastor, as a father?
Well, again, you have to think, is this my fault? You know, you come to those thoughts.
Did you work through that? Did you make an assessment?
Absolutely. We've worked through that. And, I could have been, and again, what I could have been was less angry. You know, as I look back on my life, and when my kids were little, they would see me sometimes just get angry. Now, I mean, I don't mean violent. I just mean angry. And so those are the kind of regrets that I spoke of earlier.
No matter what you do, it's clear that the type of father you are, or the values and culture you want to instill, aren't any guarantees of success. The best you can do, it seems to me, is love them. Create the best home you can, guide them while you still have the chance, and then step back and watch them. Watch them create their own path in the world, and hope that they remember most of the good that you gave them. Or what would you tell any father who's listening, and if this is the only part they really tuned into and really zoned in on, you wanted any father anywhere in the world to hear this something that you know is true?
Here's what I'm going to tell you that's true, and you're not even going to believe me, but I'm going to tell you it's true as God is my witness. They'll be gone in a minute. They'll be out of the house in a minute. And so, mate, whatever you're going to sow into them, whatever time you're going to give them, whatever quality impartation you're going to do, I'm telling you right now, you think, oh, these kids, are they ever going to grow up? Oh, these kids, are they ever going to quit crying? Oh, these kids, are they ever going to quit being a mess? Well, let me answer you, yes, and it's almost instantly. The one thing in my life that I almost feel cheated of, and I'm very careful when I say this, I almost feel cheated, is how fast my kids were gone. It's like I had them. We moved to Australia, we started pioneering, and the next thing I know, they were adults. God doesn't owe me anything, but if there was anything I ever felt maybe that God had shortchanged me on, was how fast my kids grew up. And I wished it wouldn't have gone so fast. I feel like I could have done better things. I just never got to it. I just never implemented some things.
Yeah.
And so this is the God's truth. It doesn't feel like it when they're kids. It doesn't feel like it when they're there. It feels like this is the rest of your life. It's not the rest of your life. It is a brief moment in your life. So mate, don't let it slip.
With the Jack who's sitting here today, if you took him back to the dinner table and your daughter was 16 at that same night, what would Jack today have done that Jack back then didn't?
I think I would have listened instead of spoke. You know, I'm very adamant with what I feel, very adamant with what I think. But this particular daughter, we're so alike that it's dangerous. And I think that she deserved the respect of a young woman. And I didn't give it because I felt I deserved the respect of her father. I hope, Brad. All I can say is I hope that the man that would sit at that table, if it was me right now, and that was her, that I wouldn't just see this mad moment of, badness, but that I would see how precious she is and how the joy she is to me and what a beautiful person she is and help her through this problem instead of add to it.
As dads, we want to guide and train them. But Jack is making me look back from a child's perspective. Their world today is one that I never had. None of us has. And we should try to understand it, and we should try to be the solution. They won't always agree with us. And that's hard with matters so central to who we are.
My child has to make up their own mind. it's a heartache, of course, because for me, my faith is like my core. It's like my life. It's like so much of my life flows out of my faith. And here's a child that I love with all of my heart that's not connected to that part of me at all, which is like the biggest part of me. And so, but we've learned. The other thing we learned to do is not beat ourselves up for a decision that they make as young adults.
Okay.
A decision that they made. And so what is the answer to that question? Individual choice, individual decisions.
It sounds like over the years, and I'm talking from when the kids were young, right through to as we sit here today, that you've softened. Feels to me like you've softened. Sitting here today, what's changed you? Is it those events that happen with your kids, or is it other things?
I do believe that my life has changed. I believe I've changed. And I think, I guess you have two choices. You can grow older and grow bitter. I've seen some real cranky old codgers, really like unpleasant. Or you can grow older like a fine wine. I think you have a choice. And as you grow older like that, you grow older with more value and more insight and more to offer and more love and more tenderness. And my goal is to be more like Jesus. I read a quote the other day. I think it was from Bob Goff. And he said, we're always trying to become better versions of ourselves. But what we really need to do is to become a replication of Jesus. And that sticks in my heart a bit. I think less of me and more of him is going to produce a better me all the way around.
The more I spoke with Jack, the more this was about a man looking back at his own fatherhood and not being a grandfather. He's at a life stage where he has some perspective. And when you get down to it, that's what all this is about, becoming better fathers. Perhaps there's something in Jack's idea of modelling God the Father rather than incremental versions of ourselves who still need to resolve anger issues. Let's not grow old and bitter. I much prefer a fine wine anyway. And like wine, it takes time and patience to get it right, to deliver and create something that was worth waiting for. You must have, over the years, told a few pretty bad dad jokes. You want to share any?
No. But did you hear about the butcher who backed into his meat grinder? He got a little behind in his business.
Oh! Thank you, Pastor Jack, everyone. This is the last episode in this series of fatherhood. Thank you for joining me as we heard from fathers, expanded our dad skills, and together navigated more of our way through fatherhood. Thank you to the show's producer and editor, my wife, Loretta Farrell, it's been a journey, and to Jack for speaking to me in between services on a Sunday. I'm Brett Farrell, and this is Fatherhood.